Now we really don't need to store. Okay, so the next thing we notice is that, okay, we've got some shading things going on here. These edges look kind of hard. We don't have a lot of geometry to work with, but we do want to make sure that this B, the curves along this B look smooth on the side and flat on the front. So we're going to change the shading mode. In edit mode, we go to face, shade smooth. And that gives you this effect because what's happening is the smooth shading is trying to shade it smooth across these really sharp angles, and that's sort of skewing the shadows and such. So we need to split this mesh. So I'm just gonna show you what it looks like here. If I take this face of the W and I go to edge and edge split, you'll see that that looks nice and smooth now, and the rest of it looks, or that looks, actually it all looks smooth, it looks correct. The easiest way to do this is to add another modifier called an edge split, and it's right here. So right away it's trying to split every edge. This is to actually physically rip apart the mesh at angles that are greater than 30, or sharper than 30, I guess is a better way of putting it. That generally works for most lettering, that sort of thing like this. But I'm going to actually set the angle to, let's say 60. 60 is probably correct. You see, watch the Y here when I change it back to 70. That probably should be a sharp edge. Okay, and you can also use sharp edges, which you have to set yourself to make sure that anything that doesn't get, you know, sharpified when it should is going to be set like that. So I'm just going to take a look around here, see what else I can do to make this. That's probably fine. Just show you what that looks like. I go into edge select by clicking up here, select the edge, press Command E to bring up the edge menu, and then mark sharp. And when I go back, you'll see that that's been turned into a sharp edge, but I thought that looked fine in the first place, so I'm just going to clear it. Yeah, this is probably all that needs to be done. Oh well, whatever, it's just a quick dirty thing anyway. Okay, I'm actually going to apply this modifier right now. This looks fine, and I'm going to save this project to my desktop. I'll call it Subway. Good idea to save often and frequently, as you know, but Blender has this nice iterator feature that you click the plus button here, this will change this into, you know, whatever iteration you want. Just nice to use. Okay, so now we're going to set up our textures. I'm going to go into face select by clicking up here. I'm just going to select all these front faces. Now I already have my UI pre-set up. This is an image viewer and this is a UV editor down here. I'm going to first open this SVG in GIMP. There we go. Now when you try to import vector graphics, it's going to try to guess the pixel width, or if one has actually been set in the SVG, it might show up here, but generally try to set this the width as a power of 2. So in this case I'm going to start off at 1024. It's not going to be that big in the end, but yeah. Great, that looks pretty good. And now we're going to change our canvas size so that the height is actually a power of 2 as well. I'm going to say 256. Resize, that's perfect. I'll turn off the view layer boundary because that's kind of annoying. And I am actually going to scale this down to 512 by 128. And all of our main texture sizes are going to be this size. Okay, I'm going to export this to our desktop. This is going to be a PNG file. I found that PNGs and FBX files for 3D are probably the best. They've never failed me. PNG, this is subway D for our diffuse. You notice the underscore and the D there? That's the naming convention that the game uses, and you can look up on their wiki what all those need to be called. Okay, so back in Blender, I'm going to give this a material color, create a new material rather, and to get this into the game, or into Blender, get that image I was just working on, I'm going into base color here, set it as an image texture, and then open up subway underscore D. So now in my UV editor, this is available for me to look at. Fantastique. Okay, so now we're going to unwrap this front face. Actually, just for giggles here, go into wireframe mode, select all these back faces here. I'm just going to hide them for now by pressing H. Oh yeah, and now that I look at it, I'm not going to need the back of this unless this is something that was going to be spinning on a pole, so I'm going to delete all these faces as well. Don't need them. Fantastic. So I select everything in edit mode and I press U and then do a project from view. And you'll see that if I toggle to viewport shading mode, you can see as I press G and move this around, how the textures are sort of, so we're going to try to match this up. Now really this texture could be a hell of a lot smaller now that I think about it, since it's only 2 colors. We could probably do like a 64 by 32 texture and it would still be fine. But anyway, for the purposes of this video, I'm going to scale it up using S and try to match it up as close as I can. It doesn't have to be perfect, to the subway logo that I have. It's probably just a tick big there. Like I said, it doesn't have to be perfect, and I'm not saying this is only for this asset, but for everything else as well. All right, that's not bad. We're starting to see that the transitions here aren't quite as clean as we'd like them, so we're going to have to do a bit of texture painting to fix that up. But this is fine for now. So I'm going to save, iterate. Great. So when I press Alt-H to bring back the rest of the mesh, this back part here is just going to be like a generic sort of plastic metal-y type thing. In wireframe mode, I'm going to select all of that and press U and then S for a Smart UV project. And this is going to put everything sort of in a, it's going to try to stretch it across the entire UV space here. That's fantastic. Turn on snapping, snap to vertex, make sure our pivot is the bounding box center, and I'm going to stack all of these faces here. We don't really care, you know, about too much detail from these because we're probably not going to spend a hell of a lot of time looking at them. All right, that's fine. Turn off snapping. R to rotate 90 degrees. Great. And then I'm just going to bring this up. Okay, and now we've got our plastic generic metal UV sides of the sign down here. So if I select everything now, I can see that the front face of the subway logo is where it should be. Again, like I said earlier, this could be a heck of a lot smaller since it's just solid colors, but we're going to do this for the purposes of this video. Now I press Z and then Alt-Z to go back into viewport shading mode so I can see what it looks like. That's great. So let's fix up these areas here that don't quite line up with the texture. I'm not going to manipulate these UVs at all, although you could if you wanted to. You can select vertices and move them around. You see what that's doing, but that might screw things up, particularly if you've got something a bit more complicated than this. So I'm just going to go into texture paint up here at the top. All right. So both of these windows, when you click on this, the default is to just object mode, edit mode, unhide. Oh yes. One thing that you should be aware of when you're doing this, I don't know if it's the case here. No, it's not the case here, but It's always a good idea to check before you start making 3D stuff, making or extruding and doing stuff like that. Is your face normals. Basically, they're indicators as to which is the front side of the mesh and which side is the back. In City Skylines, only trees, I believe, have the ability to have double-sided meshes. So if we go under should be under viewport shading here. Let's go back into layout and make sure that that is the case. Let's go into solid. I click this drop down, hit back face culling, and then under our overlays in edit mode, I'm going to click face normals. Now you see all these lines popping out of it. This sort of tells you, you know, if light was to refract off this, this would actually hit it and bounce back. That's great. If you are working on something like this and you say hit, if you flip the normals, I'm going to, whoops, that's not it. I hit Alt-N to bring up normals and flip. Now when I look at the mesh, that's all screwed up because the normals in edit mode, as you can see, are all pointing to the inside. That's something you have to actually keep an eye on. I'm going to flip them all back just to make sure. All right, let's go back into texture painting. Now this part down here that you can't see, turn this into orthographic mode by pressing 5 on the number pad. These are opaque, not opaque, but transparent because there's no actual pixel data there. What I'm going to do right now is just paint along the edges of this. In fact, I could probably just do this all as a solid color. But anyway, whatever. I'm going to use my color picker here to get this color for the green and set my strength to 4 just so it really does that. I'm going to give a bit of padding around the solid color. Zoom a bit to make sure that things are going well. This will give us some nice crisp edges, and as you're watching here, let's click over and see, watch as I get to the corner of this A right here. See how that's sort of starting to fill in. One thing you have to be careful of when you have your UVs aligned along a color transition is this. You should always give a little bit of padding because when you view an object that's right on those transitions in game, you might see colors you don't want to see at very sharp angles. And this is a very simple texture, so not a big deal. But anyway, color picker again. I'll pick this yellow. And I'm just gonna, it doesn't matter. It's all gonna be solid. By the way, to scale the brush, you press F and then move your mouse left and right. That'll do it. Okay, that looks about right. So now under Image in Texture Paint mode, I'm going to save as. I'm just going to save over this diffuse texture. That's great. Go back into Layout and bring our UV editor over a bit. And one thing you could do to get an idea of if you use a 2D image editing software to work with your textures is you can export this UV layout. And that's what I'm going to do right here. I go under UV, export UV layout, and I'm going to call this not path 955. I'm going to call this subway_UV. Fantastic.